cultural heritage exhibit in there, we had already separated out stuff from the African American farmstead that was here that nobody had paid attention to, so that these students came in and were able to go straight to those artifacts, look through them, figure out what they wanted to put in the exhibit, and the students, there were 9 high school students, they made that themselves, the entire hallway, and the video. So it's pretty cool stuff. I mean, that's what you can do with this. You don't have to be an archaeologist or anthropologist. What works? What works is being highly engaged with the volunteers. And I don't mean standing next to them or standing over them. If you're ever talking to a volunteer, which this is kind of common sense, but not really, because I know that when you think of a volunteer, you think of someone who's not on staff, who's not being paid, and so really they're like a visitor, but that's not what we want to do here. Volunteers are not visitors. Volunteers are staff. So when you are explaining something to a volunteer, sit down with them. Don't stand over them, don't surveil them. That's not really what we want to do. And I found when I first started working here, we used to stand in the room where they were sorting artifacts, and we didn't sort. Because right, we do that all the time. Why would we do that? And people would sit down and start sorting. We would just kind of stand and walk over them. And I was kind of following along with the person who had been there before me, but something Dr. Connolly kind of pointed out to me was that doing that isn't a very inviting way to interact with volunteers, right? Because you're basically acting like it's a classroom, and the idea, especially with Chucalissa, is to get people to participate, to be invested in what we're doing, and to want it to be better. So, because this museum would go away without people investing themselves, without getting much in return. So what they need to get in return is to feel like they have ownership over this place, more so than you yourself. It's been really hard for me, but one thing we talk about a lot of times is not necessarily telling people what needs to be done and letting them choose from it, but letting people come and get familiar with the museum and tell us what they want to do. And that's what I want, or that's what I would want volunteer days to turn into, because there are always going to be people who come, and if you have good GAs or if you have good staff who know what needs to be done, then the people who come and ask you for something to do, who are like, I just wanted to come and get some hours, I wanted to help you guys out, is there something that you're already working on? That's one thing, and we have tons of those projects, and I don't really need to speak to those, but I think that what we really should be doing is when new volunteers walk in the door, when this sorting goes away, because it's way too easy to just send people back, let them contribute to the sorting process, convince them that, not convince them because they are doing something really important, but tell them they're doing something important. It's going to be a really cool day when volunteers walk in the door, and the role of the staff is to literally give them a thorough, tour of the museum, telling them everything that we have at hand, and then asking them what they think we should do with it. Because this museum will always look one way if we don't get the opinion of people who actually are the consumers of the product at the museum. I mean, because we're all trained really similar. I'm not a museum studies person, which is really weird because I work with all museum studies people, but one thing that I've always noticed, besides how really unattractive Curtis is that, is that thing I've been able to do, and whoever might be here in the future, people from art history with some of these more creative approaches to academia can say is the museum really looks one way. You've been doing the same exhibit but refurbishing it, and what we need to do is bring in these volunteers who are members of communities, parts of institutions, and ask them what they want to see. What do your kids want to see? What's fun for you, and what's a direction you want to take this collection, and etc. And it doesn't necessarily mean that we just give the museum to people, and so there's no process. Our job is not necessarily to be the creators, but to be the people who make sure the process is done well, efficiently, and gets done. So our capacity really, as these kind of intermediaries, assistants and interns, and the people who come and may or may not receive money, but have a big type of capacity in doing things, our role is really to just, kind of broker some of these ideas. Broker them and help them be something that becomes real. And that's really what Volunteer Days has turned into. There are several people who are like, oh, all of these artifacts from this certain site, they're really neat and we'd like to go see that site. Dr. Conley's able to say, well, this is exactly where it is, and when you come back, tell me what you see and what we should be doing here. They're creating something, but we're telling them how to do it. And it's not necessarily, that's not always going to be the case, but the idea for this museum, now that the mission has been revamped, is to get the community involved. Give them a reason to come. That's what museums are for. They're not to be some house of authoritative knowledge where we tell you what you need to know, because one of the problems, I'm on a soapbox, one of the problems with America is that we tell people what their history is. and they don't ever go find it out for themselves. So.